So jump on. Hello, friends. Hello, Caesar, the Radiant Blonde, Letitia. There we go. Via request. Go live. Here we go. All right. We are waiting for Mark Hyman. He's joining in just a second here. Hello, Giselle. Hello. Dear Candide. Yes, there he is. Hello.
Hi there.
Hi, Mark. Can you hear? Yay, there you are.
Yay. Hi.
Hi,
How's it going?
gorgeous.
Hi. We
Where in the
miss you
world?
here in Maui. We miss you here. Come make a dance party.
I saw the videos with Hero. I saw Mickey was talking to me up the storm about how amazing the food was. I've just been like feeling deep amounts of FOMO, but trying to be in JOMO phase. How was it? How was?
Fantastic. It was just great to have all the humans here in this basically COVID-free place in Maui. It's pretty awesome.
Oh my gosh! I mean, look at your gorgeous beard and I mean, you're literally crushing life right now. Everyone, this is the indomitable Mark Hyman, who is in Maui right now, just recognizing the importance of living a balanced life and living what that looks like. And I'm
Yeah.
just so recognizing being your friend for so many years, just watching you kind of blossom into this sort of balance just after just running and building and writing your 14 best-selling books. You know,
Yeah.
it's just such a delight to see you in this new space. So for everyone just joining, hello friends. I'm here talking to my soul family, Dr. Mark Hyman, who's here to share about his brand new epic book. It's actually a couple months old now, but everyone needs, because the whole world is reading it, which is why I'm saying that. It's called The Pegan Diet. And the Food
Hopefully
Fix
the
is
whole world's reading it.
the whole world reading the Pegan Diet and Food Fix. I mean, all of them. But the Pegan Diet is one that I'm just so excited to just introduce everybody to share with everybody. Mark Hyman is the founder of and director of the Ultra Wellness Center, head of strategy and innovation at Cleveland Clinic. He is 14-time New York Times bestselling author, board president of clinical affairs for the Institute of Functional Medicine. He basically made and popularized functional medicine in the Western world, and to call you best friend, family member, I just feel so honored to do that for
Thank
that.
you.
So, okay, so let's get into it. So Pegan is a combination of paleo and vegan. I know you probably said this a million times, but just for everyone watching and listening, how did the concept of Pegan come about? Why are the two diets so important, and when
Yeah.
is opposite?
Well, I think we're really in a horrible situation right now because people are so confused about what to eat. And most of what we're eating is making us sick and fat and killing us. And there are so many diet wars out there, and there's so many different opinions about what you should eat, when you should eat, like whether you should eat animals or not, whether you should be vegan, vegetarian, keto, low fat, low carb, low this, high this, and it just makes people crazy. And as a doctor practicing nutritional medicine for 40 years, I've been studying nutrition for over 40 years. I've seen it all come and go. And I really focused on the science and understand not only just the science from the academic perspective, but I've been treating patients for, God, over 35 years now.
Including my sister,
And
Wendy.
yeah, well, she really has done well. I don't know if she told you, but she's all better now. So, um, and so people are just so confused about what to do, and there's all these diet wars and extremes, and I realized that we need to get beyond that and find what does the science tell us, and what is the 40 years of clinical experience seeing thousands of patients and testing them really taught me about what we should be eating and what we shouldn't be eating. And so one day I was sitting on a panel with a friend of mine who was a paleo doctor and another one was a vegan doctor, and they were fighting, and I was in the middle of going back and forth, and I said, wow, if you're a paleo and you're vegan, I must be pegan. And that was kind of a joke because there was so much tension in the room because they were fighting like crazy. And I was like, oh, everybody laughed. That was funny. And then I was like, oh, wait a minute, let me think about it. And I started thinking about it on the way home on the plane. I was like, wait a minute, they're identical, exactly the same in every aspect except for one, which is where to get protein. It's either animals or, beans and grains. That's it. Everything else. They don't like dairy, whole foods, no processed food, sugar, starch, all that out. So really very similar whole foods approach, but it's just this little nuance that seems different. And I began to realize that they have far more in common with each other than the traditional standard American diet, which is killing all of us. And that's the real enemy. And so we kind of have to sort of take a step back and go, what do we know? and how do we get people to eat in a way that helps them thrive, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, because food is the biggest driver of our biological system, period. It's the most important thing we do every day. If we understand that the quality of food matters, that food is medicine, and then we should personalize our approach, because there's no one size fits all. So the book, The Peak Diet, is really an attempt to sort of break down some of these dogmas, to kind of poke fun at it a little bit and say, okay, what are the principles of eating that we can all adhere to, that are not dogmatic, but that are inclusive, that are flexible, that are adapt to cultural preferences, and that can be personalized depending on what each person needs. And so that's really the purpose of the Peak Diet, is to sort of go, wait a minute, let's just take a step above every.
You share the 7 systems of functional medicine and how food
Yeah.
impacts each?
So just to back up a little bit, so what is functional medicine?
Yeah.
Why should we care? And how does food interact with that? So functional medicine is essentially a new paradigm in medicine that looks at root causes. It looks at the body as a system, as an ecosystem, which we are. You know, and if we think of our body as a bunch of separate parts, right? You've got your cardiovascular system, GI system, neurological system. We have all the specialists that are experts in these different parts, but no one's an expert in the whole. And that's what functional medicine is, understanding how all the whole interacts and how our concepts of disease are just blowing apart. Like if you look at the microbiome, how does your gut bacteria cause depression, cancer, heart disease, diabetes, autoimmune disease, allergies, you know, Parkinson's disease? I mean, how does that even make sense given our current paradigm? It doesn't. So functional medicine says, wait a minute, if we look at the natural laws of biology, there are a few basic systems in the body that govern everything. Those get optimized. And by the way, food can either harm each system or help them. It's not about treating disease, it's about understanding how the body functions, hence functional medicine, and optimizing that function. So we talk about these 7 core systems that underlie all the diseases. And these systems are influenced by your lifestyle and by genetics and by your environment, toxins, allergens, stress, poor diet, microbes, and so forth. All regulate these basic systems. They're your gut and your digestive system, how you absorb and assimilate food, your defense and repair, your immune system, your energy system, how you make energy in your cells, your detoxification system, how you process your own and environmental waste and chemicals, your transport, your circulation, lymphatic circulation, your communication systems, which is essentially is your hormones, neurotransmitters, and then of course your structural system, which is everything from your biomechanical, you know, muscles and bones to your subcellular membranes and everything else. And all of these are influenced by food. And so I can give you an example which sort of helps people understand what I'm talking about. Let's say you want to optimize your immune system, right? If you eat sugar and starch, which most people are right now because of comfort foods and because Americans are eating, you know, 152 pounds of sugar and 133 pounds of flour per person every year, right? It's almost a pound a day of flour and sugar for every man, woman, and child in America. That's a lot. I mean, I'm not eating that much, so some people are eating a lot more. And if you look at what that does, that suppresses immunity, which makes us susceptible to COVID and lots of other things. On the other hand, if you eat an anti-inflammatory diet, you can literally reverse that effect by cutting out the sugar and starch. But even more specifically, there are compounds in food, these phytochemicals, which is what's so exciting. There's 25,000 of these compounds in our food that we're just beginning to understand are medicines that our bodies use to help regulate our health. And as a great example in the book I talk about, which is Himalayan tartary buckwheat flour. So we can make pancakes from regular flour, which is toxic and causes diabetes and inflammation and destroys our microbiome and suppresses our immune system, or we can from the same amount of flour, a cup or two of flour, we can make pancakes from Himalayan tartary buckwheat, which is a superfood from the Himalayas.
Can
That
you
actually,
buy that
you can
online?
soon. You can soon. You can soon. But we're ramping up production. Working with the company that actually is going to be making this, called Big Bold Health. It's a great story, because it teaches you that if you understand the quality of the food, this Himalayan tartary buckwheat is like a superfood, better than regular buckwheat. It contains 132 phytochemicals, many of which are immune rejuvenating. That can help boost your immune system. It has quercetin and other things that may help fight COVID. And what the story gets even more interesting is that as we age and as our body gets insulted with toxins and bad food and everything else, the immune system ages. It's called immunosenescence. And the stem cells in your bone marrow that make the white blood cells get damaged. And you make 1 million white blood cells a second. 1 million white blood cells a second.
Wow.
But if you have a damaged, ancestor, which is the stem cell, it can cause kind of funny offspring, right? These mutants instead of white blood cells. We call them zombie cells or chip cells. These zombie cells get in the circulation, they create inflammation, they cause you to age, they cause all these heart disease, autoimmune disease, and diabetes. If you take this Himalayan tartary buckwheat, it's one of the few things that has these special phytochemicals that can kill the zombie cells and rejuvenate your immune system. So that's an example, just one deep example of how a food can harm immune system, sugar and starch and processed food, or a food, or white flour, or a superfood that has the right information in the food. The quality is there, can actually do the opposite.
So how do you sort of distinguish between, the vegan diet, which is sort of more about animal rights, animal safety, and how do you kind of reconcile being such a conscious, thoughtful person, and how do you share that with this whole audience and community?
Well, there's a really wonderful book I'm reading now called Nourishment, sort of reclaiming our nutritional wisdom from animals, and it talks about how one of the great sentences in there is that the universe is one big restaurant consuming itself, right? So whether you eat animals or not, you are part of this cycle of life and death just by virtue of being alive and being a human. And I think people are often misconceive, what they're doing with good intentions. And I want to get into sort of the meat thing, because there's like 3 issues around meat I talk about in the book. 1 is moral and ethical, 2 is environmental and climate, and 3 is health. And they often get kind of smushed together. When it comes to the basic just fact is that even if you're a vegan, if you're eating vegetables, you're using agriculture, right? Agriculture is an inherently destructive act. So depending on how they're grown, where they're grown, I mean, even organic vegetables. I went to the Brooklyn Grange and I went to the rooftop garden. It's a great organic garden, the biggest rooftop farm in America. I'm like, wow, this is amazing. How do you take care of your soil? You're growing broccoli and all these vegetables. Oh yeah, we put on bone meal and we put on oyster shells. I'm like, oh, so your broccoli is a carnivore. I got it. So, we're in this cycle of where we're even harvesting. If you have a big cabbage patch and you're harvesting cabbage, there's probably a lot of animals that live in there. So you might be killing rabbits or mice or moles. I mean, how are those lives less valuable than the factory farm animal? In fact, there's 7 billion animals killed every year just through vegetable agriculture. So we kind of are, whether we like it or not, part of the cycle, part of the direct or indirect. But that said, if people have moral objections, I can't argue with that. I have patients who are Buddhist monks who don't eat meat, and I'll work with them. But the truth is, we have to sort of have an honest conversation about, what we're really part of in this consuming itself as a restaurant. The second issue is environmental and climate, and I think you kind of cut out. I don't know if you can hear me, but the second issue is really environmental and climate. And as far as the moral issue goes, factory farming of animals should be banned. We should never do them. It's horrible for the animals, people. I mean, there's no question about it. That doesn't mean animals raised in their natural habitats and in a regenerative way is actually harmful for the animals. Of course, if you kill them, it's harmful for them. But it's still, it can be done in a very different way. The environmental climate issues are also confusing for people, because if you want to save the world, become a vegan, because factory farming animals is the biggest cause. But it's actually not. If you look at food waste. The methane produced from throwing your vegetable scraps in the garbage instead of, in a composter and ending up in a landfill, the methane released from that is 3 times the amount from factory farm animals. So if you're not composting as a vegan, you may be causing, and you're throwing out all your extra vegetables and your scraps, or you're maybe causing a worse problem. The other issue is that regenerative agriculture is definitely better and actually improving climate and reversing climate change than we actually had imagined, and that our conventional forms of agriculture and farming and food systems are the biggest cause of climate change. So by shifting how we grow food, it really can change the whole equation. As Russ Conser said, it's not the cow, it's the how. And I think that really matters.
Love that.
And also, as far as the health perspective, most of the studies on meat are actually done in periods of time where people were told not to eat meat because it's bad for your health. And the people who ate meat were really unhealthy in these big population studies. And so, they had more disease. But when you look at studies, for example, of vegans and vegetarians are compared to meat eaters who shopped in health food stores, the risk of disease goes down in half for both, because it's the overall context of your diet. Also, we're learning that factory farm meat is very different than for example, grass-finished meat, where the plants are able to, the animals are able to forage on hundreds of species of different plants. And in this book, Nourishment, I was talking to you about, this guy's a rangeland scientist, Fred Provenza, was on my podcast, and in the Doctor's Pharmacy, and we talked about, is meat medicine, right? And what they discovered recently is that animals left to their own devices and given a variety of large amounts of plants, they will seek out the plants that actually have the right medicines for them. They will seek out the plants that have the right nutrients or phytochemicals to regulate their body and their immune system, and naturally sort of munch on a lot of different things. And when they do that, these phytochemicals end up in their meat, just like the Himalayan buckwheat I was telling you about. They actually get these phytochemicals in the meat. And so, for example, if you look at green tea, it's full of these powerful compounds called catechins that are anti-cancer, detoxifying, anti-inflammatory, antioxidants. And they find that the goats, for example, are eating shrubs that contain some of these molecules. The milk of the goat will have as high levels of these phytochemicals as green tea. So, and the same thing with animals who are eating meat. So we're learning a lot about quality, and this is the whole point of the vegan diet, which is it's about quality.
Wow. So that's it. First of all, this is so because I just bought a farm upstate, which I can't believe you've come to, and we're just sort of grappling with growing our own meat, growing our own food, and how that whole ecosystem works. This is so helpful. I wanted to also ask you, kind of switch gears for a second, and just ask you, since Daybreaker, what we talk about also is often the link between your brain and your body. So what happens? What is the link between food and serotonin and brain happiness and joy? How is it all connected?
Oh my God. I cannot tell you, as a doctor, practicing functional medicine for 40 years, one of the biggest insights I've had is that our brains are connected to our bodies. Because we learned in medical school, they were just sort of like these things up here. There was a barrier called the blood-brain barrier, and nothing got through. And that was it, But it turns out that your brain is influenced by everything you're doing, including food. And food is probably one of the biggest drivers. In fact, I wrote a book in 2009, I think it was called The Ultra Mind Solution, and I have a chapter in there called The Accidental Psychiatrist, because I was treating patients for all these physical ailments, improving their diet, and their psychiatric problems would go away. Their depression would go away, their anxiety, their PTSD, their panic attacks, their even things like ADD and autism would improve. So it's like, wow, what's going on here? So I began to do the research, and since I wrote that book, probably 14 years ago, there's been so much research on the effect of the brain by our diet. And there's, for example, in Harvard, there's now a department. There's a department at Harvard of nutritional psychiatry, and a department at Stanford of metabolic psychiatry, which is poor metabolic health and sugar, how that affects our mood. We know from large randomized trials that you swap out healthy food for junk food, and people's mood dramatically improves better than medication. We know that it affects behavior in kids. You reduce violent crime and behavior in prisons and in juvenile detention centers by over 90% by giving these healthy food. I'm hanging out with this friend who's Japanese, and she's telling me that in Japan, they feed the prisoners certain diets to help control their behavior. Wow. So they give them like miso soup and brown rice and vegetables and simple, like really grounding foods, and their behavior changes. And we know that this is true in prisons in America, where you swap out healthy food, you reduce violent crime by over 56% in prisons. You add a multivitamin by 80%. So they figured it out in Japan.
So Japan is number 1 on the life longevity list. America sits at number 44 on the life longevity list. Why do you think why do you think that is? Where's the big discrepancy?
Oh, well, we are in big trouble because we are, the most affluent, but also we're the guinea pigs with the food modernization and the industrialization of our food. And so we've adopted a highly processed, industrialized diet where 60% of our calories are from processed food, flour, sugar, and soybean oil. Basically, high fructose corn syrup from corn, white flour from wheat flour, and then refined soybean oil. And those ingredients are mixed and matched and put in all sorts of color, sizes, and shapes of processed food that is driving so much disease. And we know that if you consume a lot of these foods, your risk of death is dramatically increased. For every 10% of your diet that's ultra-processed food, your risk of death goes up by 14%. That's staggering. And in Japan, they still have their traditions of their real food and their local communities. And America doesn't really have this sort of food culture, so to speak. They don't have the traditions and the history, and it's like, burgers and fries and hot dogs, like pizza, like that's American food.
Right. So if I have $100 a week to spend on groceries, what is what is your recommendation for what's a pegan pantry? Like what does a fridge or pegan pantry look like that someone can just go and easily get? It's not going to break the bank, or where would you start?
Yeah. Well, in the book, The Pegan Diet, the subtitle is 21 Practical Principles for Reclaiming Your Health in a Nutritionally Confusing World. And one of the principles is how to eat well for less, right? How to eat in an affordable way. Because most of us have been taught that it's difficult, time-consuming, and expensive to cook your own food and to eat real food and to eat well. The truth is the data don't support that. Either it's the same cost or maybe 50 cents more a day to eat healthier food. And I'm on the board of the Environmental Working Group, and we have a guide called Good Food on a Tight Budget, which is one of the best types of each category of food that are least expensive, whether it's meats or nuts or seeds or vegetables or fruit and so forth. So grains and beans, we can actually eat really well for very little. And I've done this for years. I mean, when I was in college, we had, we lived in group
Right.
houses, and we would all pitch in a little bit, and we just ate a lot of real food. So you can get food from, cheaper outlets. For example, Walmart is the biggest organic grocer in America, and it's cheap. You can go to big box stores like Costco, where you can get good quality food at much less lower prices. You can join your community supported agriculture group to get your organic vegetables dropped off direct to consumer. You can buy direct from ranchers and farmers, for example, for grass-fed meats for about $8 a pound, which is less per serving than the McDonald's hamburger. So there are ways to do it. It may take a little more work, but it's possible. And then just eating real food. I mean, is not that expensive, and cooking it yourself is way cheaper than people think. I mean, if you go to McDonald's with a family of 4, it's more expensive to eat out than it is to make a roast chicken and a salad and vegetables at home, and a roasted sweet potato. So we know that we are misinformed about the ability to eat. Now, people aren't going to meet us for having a $70 grass-fed ribeye steak with the bone in and all that if they're on a budget. But there are ways to eat real delicious whole foods and not break the bank.
So first of all, that's so in the book. That's so important, and I think that's a great thing to debunk as well around food being expensive. So in your book, you also talk about. I want to ask 2 more questions. I think they're super important, but you talk about food and mood. Food and mood. You talk about 2020. So I know that you kind of shared that a little bit before, but are there specific foods that you recommend that tie specifically to mood? You said miso soup earlier and brown rice, but are there specific...
Sure. So we know that certain foods are really harmful for your mood, right? Sugar, definitely a big problem for your mood, and starch, definitely a big problem for your mood. And also often some of the processed ingredients in our food affect our brain, whether it's MSG, which is in a lot of things, or aspartame, and it can have huge effects on our cognitive function. With that said, there are certain foods that contain nutrients that are super helpful and needed. One is magnesium, and that is found in greens and beans, so we don't eat enough of those, and nuts and seeds. Another is that helps, that's the relaxation mineral. The other are certain B vitamins, B6, B12, and folate, which B12 particularly comes from animal foods. And you can get these foods from dark green leafy vegetables and from even liver and things like that, are very, very nutrient-dense foods that can help with mood. Also, vitamin D, hugely important, and you can get it from things like porcini mushrooms and herring and mackerel and things, but you'd have to eat a lot. So getting the right sun amount or taking vitamin D is also really important. And so when I think mood, the other key nutrient besides vitamin D and the B6, B12, folate, and magnesium are omega-3 fats, because we know they play a huge role in brain function and mood, and those come from usually wild fatty fish. It used to be in everything, right? It used to be in all the wild plants we ate and all the wild animals we ate. And if you eat grass-finished beef, you're going to also get more omega-3s. But now we don't really get that except for fatty fish. So I recommend sardines, mackerel, herring, wild salmon, anchovies, things that people usually don't like, but I like all those.
All right. Well, noted. Noted here. So, so you know, today is the first day of Earth Month, right? The vegan diet also goes into the impact on what we eat and our economy, climate change, environment, education, and more. Can you talk about, our individual food choices and the impact on that? I know we touched on that a little bit before, but I just think it's so important to,
Yeah.
again, Earth Month, beginning of Earth Month, to really
Yeah.
hammer that point.
I mean, listen, Rada, we've seen unprecedented ecological and climate destruction because of our food system. Our very way of growing food is threatening our future ability to grow food because of climate change. We might have to grow corn in the North Pole and not North Dakota pretty soon, because of climate change. The reality of our destructive agricultural system is that it causes soil erosion and the loss of organic matter in the soil because of all the chemicals we put on the soil. They're literally like antibiotics that kill the microbiome of the soil. When there's no organic matter in the soil, the plants can't extract the nutrients, but even more importantly, the soil can't hold carbon. So one third of all the carbon today in the atmosphere, which is 1 trillion tons, one third of it came from the loss of soil, which is driven from our methods of farming. Everybody remembers the Dust Bowl? Well, it's we're seeing increasing desertification. We're losing huge swaths of land the size of like Nicaragua to desert every year. And so we really need to think about an agricultural system and a food system that it actually restores ecosystems, that improves the quality of the soil. And not only that, that uses less water because we are depleting our natural fresh water resources, that uses less chemicals or no chemicals so that our biodiversity can come back. We've killed half of all of bird species in this country through agriculture. 75% of pollinator species are gone. We've lost, most of our 50% of our livestock species and 90% of our plant species. And so we have this enormous ecological collapse, biodiversity loss. We use nitrogen fertilizers that pollutes the waterways, causes algal blooms, and creates dead zones the size of New Jersey and the Gulf of Mexico, which kills over 200,000 metric tons of fish a year. And there's 400 of those around the world that feed 500 million people. So we are in a massive destructive cycle. And the beautiful thing about thinking about a solution to this is that each of us eat every day. We eat 3 times a day. It's the biggest thing we do. It's the number one industry on the planet. It's food industry. And our choices matter. If we're seeking out foods that are grown in ways that are restorative and regenerative, we'll be adding to the solution instead of the problem. And it's hard to do now. I mean, there's not that many regenerative organic foods out there. You can look at, for example, Dr. Bronner's, or maybe Dr. Bronner's, Bronner's like coconut oil, for example. It says regenerative organic on the label. There's more and more work being done to get this regenerative organic certification, which goes beyond organic. It's not just organic, because organic you could use tilling, you could destroy the soil, you can use all kinds of other stuff on it. So the goal is to really design an agricultural system that will restore ecosystems, conserve water, increase biodiversity, and reverse climate change. And that's totally possible. And if people want to watch a movie about this, it's called Kiss the Ground. And you can learn more about Kiss the Ground. Just go to, I think it's on Netflix. And I was in it, but Woody Harrelson narrated, and essentially it's about regenerative agriculture. It's a great explanation of how this model works.
I love that film. It's a beautiful film. And Ryland Engelhart, who created it, who produced it, is just, like one of us, who's really interested in the food ecosystem. So, one of the things that we talk about Daybreaker all the time is joy, practicing joy, right? And food and joy are so connected together. What does Dr. Hyman do? Like, what is your joy practice? We practice joy together. What is your joy practice today? You wake up in the morning. What do you do not only to nourish your body, but to nourish your mind, to nourish your body, mind, to be happy and healthy in body, mind, and soul? What is your daily joy practice?
Well, it's like a recipe, right? So I think what is my joy recipe?
Yeah.
and I've learned there's a lot of ingredients that can go into creating joy, and I try to put all those ingredients into my life throughout the course of a day or week or month, and they're the obvious things, right? I make sure I get enough sleep. I make sure I move my body every day. I love to move my body, so I'm running, I'm biking, I'm playing tennis, I'm swimming in the ocean, I'm just enjoying my own physicality. And I, for example, yesterday I was riding my bike and went for a bike ride, and was flying down the mountain, watching the ocean in front of me, going down at 30 miles an hour, just feeling the wind on my face, and just has so much joy. Helmet
Was your
on,
helmet
helmet.
on?
Your
Okay.
your sister was chicken. She was like holding the brakes the whole time.
She
She's like, I was like, she's like this. I was like, let go of the brake.
was-
Going downhill. She's like a little old lady. I was like, what's going on
I,
there? uh, and so I make sure I move my body. I make sure that I also eat food that's going to uplift my mood and energy. And it's not just eating junk and ice cream, which can help for a minute, but it's really nourishing my body with real food. And the other thing that's really important is community. And you're such a great example of building community, Radha, and your book Belong and the Daybreaker community and all the work you've done. It's just so powerful to build an importance of community in people's lives. And so it's really deliberate, and I focus a lot of attention on friends and community. So one of my most joyful things is to invite people over, cook together, and have a delicious meal. So last night I had a few friends over. We made incredible meals of fresh scallops, a small piece of grass-fed steak. We made these Chinese long bean string beans with ginger, and we made Japanese sweet potatoes with coconut and ghee. It was so delicious. And we had these oli mushrooms, which are stir-fried with garlic. And it was just such a delicious, nourishing meal. And we had so much fun. We put on music, we danced, and that just brings me so much joy.
wow.
So it's just the simple things that actually are really the ingredients as a recipe. And whatever part of the world you're in, wherever life you're in, it's always important to think about what gives you energy, what gives you joy, how do you figure that out? And how do you most of us are working on our to-do list. We should work on our to-be list. And so those things are
Yes.
all on my to-be list.
I love that. Actually, on that note, maybe we'll end with this one question, which is like, what qualities do you look for in a friend? Like, when you think about, oh, I want to spend more time with this person, or
So
I
they
want to
have to
spend
be
more
like 5 feet tall, half Japanese, half Indian,
I'll take it.
very pretty, funny, and no.
Well, seriously, no, but I love you.
uh,
But like, what do you think?
I
Yeah,
think,
like,
yeah, I mean, the qualities are people who are connected to their soul and who are committed to love and learning and growing and fun.
yes. What a beautiful answer. So everyone listening, committing to our growth, committing to facing ourselves, committing to understanding the whole self, not just individual parts, not just cutting off the head and the neck, but really what Mark's book, The Vegan Diet, does so beautifully is not only to talk about sort of the solutions around food, but just the entire ecosystem of wholeness and wellness. And I think you're a living example of that. Like, going to Maui for extended amount of time to really just sorry, I didn't mean to say where you are, but everyone.
That's okay. It's
Okay.
fine.
But it's just, it's just so beautiful to see when, when humans who preach what they're talking about are actually living their truth, and to watch do that again and again over 14 books, like to really be sharing and speaking from such a deep place of authenticity. I just have such admiration and respect for your work and who you are and how you show up, both for yourself now, and for the world. And again,
Thank you.
unless you fuel your own being, unless you really take care of your own vessel, how can you be joyful? How can you be sharing your service? So I'm so delighted.
Thank you. Thank you.
So with
Well,
that, everyone,
everybody should get the vegan diet.
yeah, no, seriously. So everyone, so I'm pinning. We pinned here the vegan diet. Or I'm going to pin it here just a second. How do I do that? Ksenia, can you pin it? Basically, Mark's book. Otherwise, search the vegan diet on Amazon. You can find it. I'm going to put all that into the description as well, for where you can get it. And this is just the beginning, Mark. I'm going to get you on doing a series of the joy of food on the
I saw
just.
that. Yes, I'm in.
Great, yes, because I really think that to really round out joy and practicing joy, we really need to understand food. And so, what better person than you? So I love you so much, and thank you for being on here. And I can't wait for everyone to read this book. It's just, I think it's your best book yet. I think it's one of, like, it's really a brilliant sort of coming together of everything that you've really sort of been teaching all these years. So
Thank you.
I love you.
Thank you. Love you too. Bye.
All right. Bye. Talk to you soon. Bye, Mark. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Talk to you soon. Okay. How do I do this?
Yeah.